They tore down my $12 million lake house over $500, but they didn't know I owned the land under theirs. I woke up to the sound of my own house being torn apart. Wood cracking, metal folding, everything my family built reduced to dust over a $500 fine. The HOA stood there watching like it was routine, like I didn't have a say. What they didn't realize was simple. I wasn't just another homeowner, and by the time they figured it out, it was already too late. If you've ever dealt with something like this, stick with me, because this one doesn't end the way they expected. And if you want more stories like this, go ahead and hit subscribe. You're gonna want to see how this plays out. The first sound wasn't the engine. It was the wood. A sharp, splintering crack that echoed across the lake like a rifle shot, bouncing off the still water and coming back hollow. It cut straight through sleep, through the quiet, through everything that used to belong to mornings out here. I was already moving before I was fully awake. Bare feet hit the hardwood floor, then the cold stone tile, then the rough edge of the back step. Gravel bit into my soles as I stepped outside, the chill of dawn still clinging to the air. The lake was flat, glass smooth, reflecting that pale gray sky just before sunrise. And right there, 20 yards past my dock, a bulldozer was tearing through my boathouse. The steel arm dropped again. Another beam snapped. That building had stood for 60 years. My father cut those timbers himself, hauled them down in a borrowed truck, set them in place one by one. The roofline still carried the uneven pitch he used to joke about. Good enough to keep the rain out. Not good enough to impress anyone. Now it folded in on itself like it was nothing. Dust rolled out across the shoreline, mixing with the smell of diesel and old cedar. I stood there, in nothing but a pair of boxers, chest bare to the cold, watching it happen like my brain hadn't caught up to my eyes yet. "Hey!" My voice came out rough, not loud enough. I stepped forward, gravel grinding under my heels. "Hey, shut it down." The operator didn't stop, didn't even look at me. The machine pushed forward again, blade catching the corner of the structure, lifting it just enough to snap the remaining supports. The roof sagged, then dropped in a slow collapse that sent a wave of debris sliding toward the water. That's when I saw her. 50 feet back from the shoreline, standing on the edge of my driveway like she owned the view, Veronica Hale held her phone up in one hand, recording. The other hand rested casually around a plastic cup, iced coffee, condensation dripping down over her fingers, designer sunglasses, even in the gray light, white blazer, perfect posture, like this was something worth documenting, like it was a show. I walked toward her. Every step felt deliberate, controlled, like if I moved too fast, something inside me would break loose I wouldn't be able to put back. What the hell is this? She didn't lower the phone, didn't even blink. "Good morning, Mr. Cole," she said, voice smooth, almost cheerful. "You were notified." Behind her, 2 sheriff's deputies stood near the road, hands resting near their belts, not tense, not relaxed, just present. Watching. I looked at them, then back at her. Notified of what? She shifted the phone slightly, making sure it caught both me and the machine in frame. Architectural violation, Section 4.2, non-compliant structure, failure to remedy within the allotted period. A small smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. Balance outstanding.
Very much so.
$500. 500. I turned back toward the lake just as the bulldozer arm came down again. The last intact wall, the one with the old green paint, the one we'd never quite matched after years of repairs, gave way in a single, cracking collapse. That wall had my wife's initials carved into it. I didn't move. Didn't run down there. Didn't try to stop it again. $500. I repeated, quieter now. Veronica finally lowered the phone a few inches, enough to look at me over the top edge. You were given multiple notices, she said. Delinquent fees. Non-compliance. This action is fully authorized by the association and approved by Township Code Enforcement. I glanced at the deputies again. You're just going to let this happen? The older one, Ruiz, if I remembered right, shifted his weight. Sir, he said, measured, careful, they have a valid work order, signed, filed, approved, paperwork, always paperwork. I let out a slow breath, the kind that burns on the way out. On my property. Veronica's smile didn't change. On association-regulated property, she corrected. Behind us, the machine idled for a second, then pushed forward again, grinding what was left of the boathouse into a flattened pile of timber and broken nails. The sound was different now, less sharp, more final. I watched until the operator backed the machine away, until there was nothing left standing higher than my knee. Just a mound of splintered wood and dust settling over everything like a thin, gray blanket. The lake didn't react. It stayed still, quiet, reflecting the whole thing like it didn't belong to me anymore. Veronica raised her phone again, finishing whatever clip she was recording. Then she lowered it, glanced at the screen, and nodded to herself like she'd just captured something satisfying. Compliance achieved, she said. No apology, no hesitation, just a line item checked off. I stepped closer to her, close enough to see the reflection of the debris field in her lenses. You're going to regret this, I said. Not loud, not threatening, just certain. For the first time, something flickered across her face. Not fear, nothing that obvious, just a brief hesitation, like she was trying to decide whether I was serious or just angry. Then it was gone. I doubt that, she said lightly, turning away. Good day, Mr. Cole. She walked back toward her SUV without another word, heels clicking against the gravel like she was leaving a meeting that had gone exactly as planned. The deputies followed a moment later, giving me one last look, half apology, half warning, before climbing into their cruiser. Engines started, doors shut, and just like that, they were gone. Silence rolled back in, slow and heavy. I stood there alone, staring at the pile where my boathouse had been. 60 years of work, memory, and quiet mornings reduced to something you could haul away in a dump truck. The wind shifted slightly, carrying the smell of fresh-cut wood and diesel across the water. I walked down to the edge of it, knelt, picked up a piece of timber no longer than my forearm. The edge was clean where it had snapped. The grain still tight, still strong. My father used to say good wood tells the truth when you break it. This one had held as long as it could. I turned it over in my hands, brushing dust off with my thumb. And then I looked past it, past the wreckage, past the shoreline, out toward the stretch of land that curved around the lake. Rows of identical houses, fresh docks, manicured lawns. The entire neighborhood Veronica Hale claimed to run. Every road, every lot, every inch they thought belonged to them. I didn't feel anger anymore. Not the kind that makes you shout. Just something quieter, colder, measured. Because somewhere in the back of my mind, something didn't line up. That paperwork she was so confident about, that authority she kept repeating, the way they moved so fast to tear this down. People don't rush like that unless they're trying to get ahead of something. I looked back at the broken wood in my hands, then out at the lake again. $500, I said under my breath. No. That wasn't what this was about. Not even close. I dropped the timber back onto the pile and stood up slowly, dust settling around my feet. If they were willing to do this over $500, then they already knew something I didn't. The question was, what? And more importantly, why did they need it gone before I found out? I didn't move from the shoreline for a long time after the engines faded. The lake stayed quiet. Too quiet. Like it had already accepted what just happened. I walked back up toward the house slowly, each step crunching over gravel that hadn't changed in decades. The same gravel my father dumped here himself, back when the road was still dirt and the nearest neighbor was half a mile out. Now I had 47 houses wrapped around me like a noose. I went inside, pulled on jeans and a shirt, then headed straight for the kitchen table. The envelope was still there. White, thick, official. I hadn't taken it seriously when it showed up 3 days ago. That was my first mistake. I slid it open again and laid everything out flat. Violation notice. Architectural non-compliance. Balance due, $500. At the bottom, in clean printed type, failure to remit payment within 72 hours may result in corrective action as authorized by the association. Corrective action. I let out a slow breath and flipped to the next page. A breakdown of charges, inspection fee, administrative processing, compliance enforcement. All of it neat, organized, legally worded. But something about it didn't sit right. I'd spent 30 years as a civil engineer. I knew how permits worked. I knew how property compliance was enforced. There were steps, notices, appeals, time. Nobody jumped from a $500 fine to a bulldozer in 3 days. Nobody, unless they needed something gone fast. I grabbed my phone and dialed the number listed at the top of the letter, straight to voicemail. Mirror Lake Estates HOA. Veronica's voice came through, smooth and practiced. Your community, your investment, your future. Please leave a message. I hung up before the tone. Tried again. Same result. Third time, I let it ring longer. Nothing. I set the phone down and looked back at the paperwork. There was a permit attached, township approval stamp, code enforcement signature. Everything lined up on the surface. Too clean. I grabbed my keys. If she wasn't answering, I'd go find her. Veronica Hale's office sat at the edge of the subdivision, one of those finished basements with a plaque on the mailbox that said HOA Administration, like it meant something. I pulled up in my truck, the engine ticking as it cooled. The neighborhood looked different now, not peaceful, controlled. Every lawn cut to the same height, every mailbox identical. Every house painted some variation of beige that probably had a name someone got paid to invent. Uniform. Replaceable. I stepped out and walked up to the door. Knocked once. No answer. Knocked again, harder. After a few seconds, the door opened just enough for her to stand there, blocking the frame. Veronica Hale didn't look surprised to see me. She looked prepared. Mr. Cole, she said, I assumed you might come by. I called. I don't take unscheduled calls regarding enforcement actions. Of course she didn't. I held up the paperwork. You demolished a structure that's been standing longer than this entire subdivision, over $500. Over non-compliance, she corrected calmly. It was on my land. Land that falls under association governance. That's not what this says. I tapped the permit. Her eyes flicked down for half a second, just long enough to notice. That's township approval, she said. We operate within their guidelines. 3 days, I said. You gave me 3 days. You were given prior notice regarding outstanding obligations, which I never received. That's not what our records show. Of course they didn't. I stepped a little closer. Who else? I asked. She tilted her head slightly. I'm sorry? Who else have you done this to? That was the first time her expression shifted. Just slightly. You're implying a pattern, she said. I'm asking a question. She held my gaze for a moment, then smiled again, smaller this time. If residents choose not to comply with community standards, consequences follow. That wasn't an answer. That was confirmation. I lowered the paperwork. You tore down something that wasn't yours. She crossed her arms lightly. We enforce the bylaws that maintain property value for everyone in this community. For everyone, I repeated. Yes. Behind her, I could see the edge of a filing cabinet. Color-coded folders, labels facing outward, organized, systematic. This wasn't random. $500, I said again. You're welcome to settle the remaining balance, she replied. Though at this point, additional administrative fees may apply. I almost laughed, not because it was funny, because it was so far past reasonable it stopped making sense. You're charging me more after you destroyed it. That's how enforcement works. No hesitation, no doubt, just certainty. I nodded slowly. All right, I said. Something in my tone must have landed differently, because she watched me more closely now. Is there anything else? She asked. Yeah, I said. There is. I stepped back from the door. Send me everything. Her brow furrowed slightly. Everything? She repeated. Every notice. Every fee. Every document you've got with my name on it. For what purpose? So I can understand how you got from a fine to a bulldozer. For a moment, she didn't answer. Then she gave a small nod. You'll receive a full account summary by the end of business tomorrow. Good. I turned and walked back toward my truck. Didn't rush. Didn't look back. But I could feel her watching me, waiting for something. An outburst. A threat. Anything she could use. I didn't give her one. Jake Mercer caught up to me before I hit the main road. He leaned against his fence, arms folded, watching as I slowed down. Hell of a show this morning, he said. I cut the engine. You saw it. Whole neighborhood did. He nodded toward the lake. Word travels fast when something gets torn down that loud. I stepped out. You ever hear of them doing that before? Jake hesitated, then looked past me, toward the houses lining the shoreline. Yeah, he said finally. Once. I waited. Reagan's, he said. 4 houses down from yours. I frowned. I don't see them. You wouldn't. He shrugged. They're gone. Gone how? Leanne turned into foreclosure, he said. Started with a fine. Less than yours, actually. My jaw tightened. How much? 800 and change. $800. And they lost the house? Teacher salary, Jake said. Couldn't keep up once the penalties stacked. HOA pushed it through. Took the property at auction. I felt something settle in my chest. Cold. Deliberate. They live where now? 40 minutes inland, last I heard. He looked at me. Didn't take long either. Once it started, it moved fast. Just like mine. Too fast. I leaned against the side of my truck, staring out at the line of houses curving along the lake. 47 parcels. Every one of them under the same rules, the same enforcement, the same paperwork. They're not collecting fines, I said quietly. Jake watched me. No, I continued. They're building cases. For what? I didn't answer right away, because I didn't know yet. But I knew this: you don't escalate that quickly unless the end goal isn't the money, it's the property. I pushed off the truck and opened the door. You got copies of your HOA documents? I asked. Jake blinked. Yeah. Somewhere. Find them. For what? Because I think we're all looking at the wrong thing. I climbed into the driver's seat and started the engine. Jake stepped closer. What are you thinking? I looked past him out toward the lake one more time, at the empty space where the boathouse used to stand. They're not enforcing rules, I said. I shifted the truck into gear. They're taking land. I pulled away before he could respond. Because if I was right, then $500 wasn't the problem. It was the excuse, and whatever they were really after, they were already moving faster than I was. Which meant I was behind, and I didn't know by how much. I drove straight past my house, didn't stop, didn't look at the empty space where the boathouse used to stand. I already knew what I'd see. Instead, I circled the lake. Slow, windows down, engine low, just enough to hear the water against the shoreline as I passed each property. 47 houses. That number stuck in my head. 47 lots carved out of land that used to be open, uninterrupted shoreline. Now every stretch had a dock, a fence, a sign, something claiming control. I pulled over near the far bend where the road narrowed and the houses sat tighter together. There was a sign planted near the waterline. Private HOA property. Authorized use only. I got out and walked down toward it. The sign wasn't old. Clean edges, fresh paint, recently placed. But the ground it sat in, that was older. Much older. The slope down to the lake hadn't changed. The rock line was still uneven in the same way I remembered. That wasn't something you rebuilt with landscaping. That was natural. I crouched, ran my hand along the dirt at the base of the signpost. Compacted. Undisturbed. Like nothing had been dug here in decades. They hadn't reshaped the land. They'd just claimed it. I stood up slowly and looked out across the water. From here you could see the full curve of the lake. My place about near the widest stretch, right where the shoreline opened up. And every house along that curve had something in common. Their docks all pointed toward the same central access point. The same piece of shoreline. My shoreline. I turned back toward the road just as a truck door slammed behind me. Jake. He walked down the slope, hands shoved into his jacket pockets. You're doing the same thing I did, he said. What's that? Trying to make it make sense after the fact. I glanced at the sign. You ever notice how all their docks line up? Jake followed my line of sight. Yeah, he said. Figured it was just how they designed it. Designed what? The access. The community layout. There's no such thing as community layout without a master plan, I said. And a master plan has boundaries. Jake frowned. So? So this isn't random. I pointed along the shoreline. They didn't just build wherever they felt like it. They followed something. Like what? I didn't answer right away, because the more I looked at it, the more it felt familiar. Not the houses, not the docks, the spacing, the angles, the way everything curved with the lake instead of against it. That wasn't subdivision planning. That was original land use. I walked back up to the truck. Where's the Reagan place? I asked. Jake nodded down the road. Couple lots over. Why? Because if they lost it the way you said they did, there should be a paper trail. Jake leaned against the bed of his truck. You think this is about more than fines. I know it is. He watched me for a second. Then what is it? I looked back at the lake, at the line where the water met the land, at the places where the docks touched down like they'd always been meant to be there. They're acting like they own it, I said. Yeah, but they didn't build it. Jake didn't respond. Didn't need to. We both knew that much was true. I climbed back into my truck. Come on, I said. Where are we going? To see what they did to the Reagans. The house was already occupied. Fresh paint. New truck in the driveway. No sign of anything wrong unless you knew what you were looking for. Jake knocked. A man in his 30s opened the door, cautious. Can I help you? Yeah, I said. I'm Ethan Cole. I live down the shoreline. His expression shifted slightly. Recognition. You're the one with the demolition. That's me. He hesitated, then stepped outside, closing the door behind him. Name's Travis, he said. Just moved in a few months ago. You buy this place from the HOA? From an LLC, he said. Why? I nodded once. Mind if I ask how much? He gave me a number. It was low. Too low for lakefront property in this area. You ever hear of the Reagans? I asked. Previous owners? He said. Yeah. Something about foreclosure. Over $800. He blinked. That's what they told you? That's what I heard. He looked uncomfortable now. Look, man, I just bought the place. Title company cleared everything. Said it was clean. Of course they did. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. Did they show you the original parcel map? He frowned. The what? The land this house sits on before it was subdivided. They showed me the lot boundaries, he said. That's all that matters, right? I held his gaze. No, I said. It's not. Jake shifted beside me. Ethan. But I was already turning back toward the truck. Thanks, I said to Travis. You might want to start asking better questions. We drove off before he could respond. Halfway back around the lake, I pulled over again. This time I didn't get out right away. I just sat there, engine idling, staring at the water. Say it, Jake said finally. They're flipping properties, I said. Yeah, you already said that. Not just flipping, I said. Positioning. Jake turned toward me. For what? I tapped the steering wheel once, thinking. They fine you. You can't pay. They escalate. Foreclosure. Then they take the property at a discount. That's not new. No, I said. It's not. I looked out at the line of docks again. But what if the houses aren't the real asset? Jake didn't say anything. Think about it, I continued. 47 parcels. Same HOA. Same enforcement. Same pressure points. And every one of those parcels sits on land that existed before the HOA. Jake shook his head slightly. I'm not following. I turned to him. What if they don't actually own what they think they own? That landed. He stared at me for a second. You're saying the HOA doesn't own the land? I'm saying I don't think anyone's checked. Silence stretched between us. Then Jake let out a low breath. Then who does? I looked back toward my place, toward the stretch of shoreline where my boathouse used to stand, toward the land my father never sold. I'm going to find out, I said. I shifted the truck into gear, because one thing was clear now. This wasn't about a fine. It wasn't about compliance. It wasn't even about control. It was about something buried underneath all of it, something old, something written down long before Veronica Hale ever showed up with her paperwork and her rules. And if I was right, then the lake they thought they owned was never theirs to begin with. I didn't go home, not yet. If there was something buried in this, it wasn't sitting in a filing cabinet at my place. It was sitting somewhere official, somewhere nobody thought to question because it had been stamped and archived long before anyone cared. The county records office was 40 miles inland. I made the drive without turning on the radio. The building looked exactly like every government office I'd ever dealt with. Brick, narrow windows, a sign that hadn't been updated since the late 80s. Inside, it smelled like paper and floor wax. Good. Paper meant records. Records meant answers. I walked up to the counter. A woman in her 70s sat behind it, reading, glasses low on her nose, pen paused over a crossword. She didn't look up right away. "Help you?" she said after a second. "I need to pull original deed records," I said. "Lakewood Shoreline, early 60s. Owner name Cole." That got her attention. She looked up fully now. "Cole?" she repeated. "Yeah." She set the pen down. "Haven't heard that name tied to that land in a long time," she said. "You family?" "I am." That was enough. She stood, slow but steady, and motioned me around the counter. "Come on," she said. "Let's see what your people left behind." The machine she rolled out looked like it belonged in a museum. Microfilm reader, the kind that hums when it warms up. "Most folks don't bother with this anymore," she said, feeding the reel into place. "They just trust whatever's already digitized." "That a problem?" She glanced at me. "It can be." The screen flickered to life. Black and white text, slightly blurred with age. "Here we go," she said. 1963, original filing." She adjusted the focus. The words sharpened. "Master parcel deed, 42 acres, registered to Cole Holdings." I leaned in. 42 acres, not 2.8, not the size of my lot. 42. That includes shoreline, access roads, and... She paused, scanning the line, all appurtenant land and water rights. Water rights. My chest tightened slightly. "That's the whole lake?" I asked. She gave a small shrug. "Depends how it was structured," she said. "But it covers more than just a house lot, that's for sure." She advanced the film. "Now let's see what happened next." The machine clicked forward. Another filing. She slowed the scroll. "Well, that's interesting," she muttered. "What?" "Looks like your family bought out a partner." I leaned closer. There it was. "Transfer of interest. Full ownership assigned to Cole Holdings bought him out," I said. "For next to nothing," she replied. "Dollar and consideration. That usually means the other party was in trouble. So after 65... You're looking at single ownership," she said. "All 42 acres. The number settled in. 42 acres wrapped around that lake. Every house I'd driven past. Every dock. Every road. All of it sitting inside that original parcel." "Keep going," I said. She did. Another document surfaced. She squinted at it. "Oh, now that's smart." "What is?" "Non-subdivision covenant," she said. "Your family didn't break the land up. They kept it intact." "What does that mean?" "It means they leased use, not ownership," she said. "People could build, live there. But the underlying land," she tapped the screen, "never changed hands." My pulse slowed. Not faster, slower, controlled. "Keep going," I said again. The machine clicked forward. Years passed in seconds. Then... She stopped. "Well," she said quietly, I didn't like the tone. What? Looks like partial subdivision, she said. A few lots carved out. How many? 4, she said, including yours. I nodded. That made sense. My place. The old houses. The originals. But the rest? She traced the screen again, listed as retained common land under original ownership. Retained. Not sold. Not transferred. Held. How much is left? I asked. She did the math in her head. 38 acres, she said. 38. I leaned back slightly. Show me anything after that. She scrolled again. Years of nothing major. Then, her finger paused. There's your HOA, she said. I stepped closer again. A development company filing. Subdivision overlay. New lot designations. Sales. Transfers. All neat. All clean. All based on something that didn't match what came before. They're selling parcels, I said. Looks like it. But based on what? She tapped the earlier document. Based on this, she said. Or at least what they think this says. What do you mean? She looked at me over her glasses. They're treating that 1998 subdivision like it replaced the original deed. And it didn't. No, she said simply. It modified part of it. She pointed again. But this part? She tapped the retained land section. That never changed. I felt it click. Not all at once, piece by piece, the docks, the roads, the clubhouse Jake mentioned, the signs, the control, all built on land that was never fully transferred. Pull the clubhouse lot, I said. She raised an eyebrow. You're sure? Yeah. She loaded another reel, scrolled, stopped. There it is. I stared at the screen. HOA clubhouse parcel. Referenced from 1998 subdivision, but underneath it, a smaller line, almost ignored. Source. Original master parcel. Not a transfer. A reference. They didn't own it, I said quietly. She didn't answer right away. Then, doesn't look like they ever did, she said. Silence filled the room. The hum of the machine suddenly louder than it should have been. They've been collecting fees, I said. Looks that way. Enforcing rules. Demolishing structures. She didn't respond to that one. Didn't need to. I stepped back from the screen. Everything shifted. Not emotionally. Structurally. The entire situation flipped. This wasn't a dispute over compliance. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was control built on something that didn't belong to them. And they knew it. They had to. Which meant they weren't just collecting money. They were protecting something. I looked back at the screen one more time. At the original name stamped across 42 acres. At the retained land no one bothered to question. At the quiet line that changed everything. Can I get copies of all this? I asked. She smiled faintly. I was hoping you'd ask. I walked out of that building with a folder under my arm and something steadier in my chest. Not anger. Not yet. Clarity, because now I understood why they moved so fast. Why they didn't give me time. Why they tore that boathouse down without hesitation. It wasn't about a violation. It was about exposure. About removing anything that tied this land back to what it used to be. Back to who actually owned it. I stopped at my truck and looked back at the building, then down at the folder. 38 acres, still sitting under my name, under my family's name, under paperwork that had never been properly replaced. I got in, started the engine, and headed back toward the lake. Because now the question wasn't what they were doing. That part was clear. The question was, what happens when they realize I know? I decided not to find out. Not yet. By the time I got back to the lake, the sun was higher, the neighborhood awake, cars moving, people out walking dogs, life continuing like nothing had happened that morning, like a building hadn't been erased, like the ground under their feet wasn't about to shift. I pulled into my driveway and parked in the same spot I had that morning. The pile of debris sat where the boathouse used to stand, flattened, scattered, already starting to look like it had always been that way. That was the thing about destruction. It didn't take long for people to accept it. I stepped out, folder in hand, and walked past it without stopping. Inside, I cleared the kitchen table. Every piece of paper I brought back from the county went down in front of me. Original deed, transfer records, retained parcel documentation. Every page lined up edge to edge. 42 acres, reduced to 4 parcels, 38 still intact, still mine. I didn't feel the need to call Veronica, didn't feel the need to confront anyone. Because the moment I did, the moment they knew I understood, they'd change tactics. And right now, they were comfortable, confident, careless. I picked up my phone and dialed the only person I knew who'd see this for what it was. Lydia Grant, the voice answered. Direct, no greeting. It's Ethan Cole, I said. I need you to look at something. What kind of something? Property law. Original deed conflict. Possible invalid subdivision. There was a pause. Then, how big? 38 acres, I said. Another pause. Longer this time. I'm coming to you, she said, and hung up. She arrived an hour later. No small talk. No wasted movement. Lydia Grant didn't carry emotion into a room, just focus. She stepped inside, glanced once at the debris outside through the window, then at the papers spread across my table. That yours? She asked. It was. She nodded once. Walk me through it. I did. From the demolition, to the fine, to the records office, to the retained parcel. She didn't interrupt, didn't react. Just listened, flipping through pages as I talked. When I finished, she leaned back slightly, eyes still on the documents. They moved fast, she said. Too fast. Yeah. She tapped one of the pages. This, she said, is the problem. The subdivision? The assumption behind it, she corrected. They treated a partial division like a full transfer. They built everything on it, and enforced it like they owned it. She looked up at me. They don't. Not maybe. Not possibly. Don't. You're sure? She held up the original deed. This supersedes everything that came after unless it was legally dissolved or replaced, she said. And from what I'm seeing, it wasn't. I exhaled slowly. So what does that mean? It means, she said, every structure built on that retained land is sitting on property your family never sold. The words didn't hit hard. They settled, like something that had always been true finally being spoken out loud. And the HOA? She gave a slight smile. Operating authority doesn't equal ownership, she said. They can regulate behavior. They can enforce bylaws within limits. And demolition? Only if they have legal control over the land. I looked out the window at the wreckage. They didn't. No, she said. They didn't. Silence sat between us for a moment. Then she leaned forward again. So here's the real question, she said. What do you want to do with this? I didn't answer immediately. Because the obvious answer, take it back. Shut them down. Burn the whole thing to the ground legally. That wasn't what I felt. What I felt was, Precision. They've been doing this to people, I said. Fines, liens, foreclosures. She nodded. I believe it. They're not just managing a neighborhood, I continued. They're extracting it. That's what this looks like. Rested my hands on the table. If I push this now, I said, what happens? She didn't hesitate. They fight, she said. Hard. They'll delay, dispute, bury you in process, and they'll clean up anything sloppy before you can prove it. Meaning if there's anything else wrong in how they're operating, she said, you won't see it. I understood. Because they'll know I'm looking. Exactly. I leaned back, looked at the ceiling, then back at her. So I don't push. No, she said. You don't. I nodded once. What do I do instead? She picked up a pen and tapped it lightly against the table. You let them keep going, she said. I looked at her. You let them operate exactly the way they've been operating, she continued. You document everything, every action, every overreach, every financial move. And when they cross the line again? She met my eyes. You don't stop them. That sat there for a second. Cold, strategic. Why? Because the more they act like they own something they don't, she said, the easier it is to prove they never did. I looked back out the window, at the empty space, at the shoreline beyond it. They already crossed the line, I said. She nodded. Good, she said. Then we build the case around it. That afternoon, I did nothing. No calls, no complaints, no confrontation. I walked the property once, slow, methodical, taking photos of everything. The debris, the shoreline, the access points, every angle, every structure near the boundary lines. Then I stopped, sat on the edge of what used to be my dock, and watched the water move. Across the lake, I could see movement near the clubhouse. Construction crews, new lumber, expanding something. I narrowed my eyes. They're not slowing down, I muttered. Jake pulled up beside me not long after. They started work on the clubhouse expansion, he said. This morning. Of course they did. I nodded. Good. Jake frowned. Good? Yeah, I said. I stood up, brushed dust off my hands. Let them build. He stared at me. You serious? Completely. Ethan, they just tore down your place. I know, and you're just going to let them keep going? I looked back at the lake, at the structures rising where they shouldn't be, at the lines they were crossing without realizing it. No, I said quietly. I'm going to let them finish. Jake shook his head slowly. I don't get it. You will, I said, because the truth was, stopping them now would only limit what I could prove. But letting them keep going, letting them build more, spend more, claim more, that turned a mistake into a pattern, and a pattern into something a court couldn't ignore. I looked out across the lake one more time, at everything they thought they controlled, at everything they were adding on top of land they didn't own. Every inch they build, I said, is another piece of evidence. Jake didn't respond. He just followed my gaze. And for the first time, he saw it. Not as a neighborhood, not as a system, but as something fragile, something built on the wrong foundation, something that could collapse the moment the truth hit it. And I wasn't going to stop it. Not yet. By the next morning, the sound of construction replaced the silence. Not on my property, across the lake. I stood at the edge of what used to be my dock, coffee in hand, watching a crew unload lumber near the HOA clubhouse. 2 trucks, a trailer, Fresh materials stacked in neat piles like they were planning something permanent. They weren't repairing. They were expanding. Jake pulled up behind me again, engine idling. They poured new footings yesterday, he said. Didn't even wait a day after your place. I nodded once. Good. He let out a breath. You keep saying that. Because it is. I set the coffee down on a post that no longer had anything to hold on to. Every dollar they spend building on land they don't own, I said, tightens the noose. Jake crossed his arms, watching the crew across the water. They don't look worried. They're not. Why not? Because nobody's told them they should be. I turned back toward the house, and I'm not going to be the one who does. By noon, the first notice showed up, bright orange, stapled to my front door. Final warning. Non-compliance enforcement. I pulled it off and read through it once. Then again. Additional fines, new violations, landscaping issues, structural debris not cleared to HOA standards. They were stacking pressure, trying to force a reaction. I folded the notice in half and set it on the table with the rest of the paperwork. Didn't call. Didn't respond. Just documented it. Photo. Timestamp. Filed. By mid-afternoon, 2 more showed up. One on the mailbox. One posted near the driveway entrance. They wanted visibility. Public pressure. Neighbors drove by slower now. Watching. Judging. I caught a couple of them standing near the edge of the road, talking quietly, glancing over like I was the problem. That was part of it too. Isolation. Make the target look unstable. Make everyone else step back. I let them. That evening, I drove down to the clubhouse. Didn't go inside. Didn't need to. The work was happening outside. New framing going up along the side of the building, extended patio, reinforced decking facing the lake. They were building toward the water, toward the exact line I'd seen on the survey. I leaned against the hood of my truck and watched, measured, counted. Every support post, every extension, every inch past where it should have stopped. A man in a reflective vest walked over after a few minutes. You with the HOA? He asked. No. He nodded toward the structure. Then you can't be back here. Active construction zone. I didn't move. Who signed off on this expansion? Association board, he said. Permits are cleared. Through who? Township, he replied. Same as everything else. Same as everything else. That phrase again. Mind if I see the permit? He hesitated, then shook his head. Not my call. Of course it wasn't. I pushed off the truck and stepped closer to the structure instead, just close enough to see the base of the new supports. They weren't anchored deep. Temporary pour. Fast job. Quick turnaround. They were building speed, not stability. I took a few photos, different angles, close-ups, then stepped back again. You done? The foreman asked. For now. I turned and walked away. Didn't argue. Didn't push. Because arguing would have stopped them. And stopping them was the last thing I wanted. That night, Lydia called. You were right to stay quiet, she said. They're escalating. I know, that's good. I leaned back in the chair, staring at the spread of documents across the table. They're building new structures now, I said. Expanding the clubhouse. Perfect. Perfect? New construction means new liability, she said. New permits, new approvals, more paper trails, and more exposure. Exactly. I nodded slowly. They're not just maintaining control, I said. They're increasing it, which makes the fall bigger. That sat there, heavy, measured, How far do we let this go? I asked. She didn't hesitate. As far as they're willing to take it. I looked out the window, at the lake, at the quiet surface hiding everything underneath. They already crossed the line, I said. Then we document how many times they do it again. The next morning, Jake showed up earlier than usual. They blocked off access near the east shoreline, he said. Put up new signage. I grabbed my keys. Let's go. The sign was bigger this time. Metal, bolted into the ground. HOA restricted access. Private property. I stood in front of it, reading the words slowly. Then looked past it. At the stretch of land behind it. At the shoreline that hadn't changed in 50 years. At the exact coordinates I'd seen on that original deed. This is it, I said. What? Jake asked. I pointed at the ground. They're claiming the part they need most. For what? For control, I said. Access to the lake. Everything runs through this point. Jake looked around. They're locking people out of their own shoreline. Not theirs, I said. Yours. I didn't answer. Didn't need to. We both knew it now. I stepped forward and took a photo of the sign, then another of the surrounding area, then a wide shot showing the structure behind it. Every angle, every detail. Because this wasn't just overreach anymore. This was deliberate, strategic, and repeated. I lowered the phone and looked back toward the lake, at the docks, at the expansion, at the signs, at everything they'd built on top of something they didn't own. They're digging deeper, Jake said quietly. I nodded. Good, I replied. He glanced at me. You're not even angry anymore. I thought about that, about the morning, about the sound of wood breaking, about the empty space where my father's work used to stand. It's not anger, I said finally. Then what is it? I looked back at the sign, at the word private stamped across something that legally wasn't theirs. It's timing. Jake didn't respond, because he understood. Every move they made now, every structure, every notice, every restriction, was adding weight to something that hadn't broken yet, but would. And when it did, it wouldn't be quiet. The survey report came in just after noon. Email first, then a hard copy an hour later, hand-delivered by a kid who looked too young to be carrying something that could unravel an entire neighborhood. I didn't open it right away. I already knew what it would say, but knowing something and proving it, those were two different things. Jake was there when I finally spread it out on the kitchen table. Lydia joined on speaker. Walk me through it, she said. I unfolded the first page. Clean layout, professional stamp. GPS coordinates plotted down to inches. Red lines, blue overlays, and right there, encroachments. Not small ones, not questionable ones. Clear, defined, documented. Start with the clubhouse, Lydia said. I flipped to the next page. There it was. The HOA clubhouse outlined in blue, sitting fully inside the red boundary of the original parcel. No overlap, no ambiguity. Fully. Inside. Jake let out a low whistle. They built the whole thing on your land. Not just that, I said. I pointed lower. Parking lot, retention pond, walkways. Every single one of them inside the retained acreage. Lydia's voice came through, steady. That's not an easement, she said. That's occupation. I turned another page. Residential plots. House after house. 11 of them. Each one with part of its structure crossing into the red boundary. One by a foot. Another by 3. One. 6 feet. Jake leaned in closer. Whose is that? I checked the label. Lot 17. Veronica Hale. I didn't say anything at first, just stared at it. The clean line of her foundation cutting into land she claimed to regulate. That's her house, Jake said quietly. I know. The room went still. Even Lydia didn't speak for a second. Then, that changes everything, she said. No, I replied. It proves everything. I flipped back to the overview map. 47 parcels, 38 acres retained, and now, measured, verified, every inch accounted for. They didn't just overstep, Jake said. They crossed into it. Repeatedly, I added. Lydia's tone sharpened slightly. This isn't a boundary dispute anymore, she said. This is unauthorized use of private land on a large scale. And demolition? I asked. That's worse. I looked down at the photos attached to the report. My shoreline. Before, after. The empty space where the boathouse used to stand. They destroyed a structure on land they don't control, she continued. That opens them up to liability far beyond fines. Jake straightened. So what do we do now? I didn't answer immediately, because for the first time, we weren't reacting. We had position. I leaned back in the chair and looked at the map again, at the red lines, at the blue overlays sitting inside them like they belonged. They've been acting like owners, I said. Yeah, they've been enforcing like owners. Jake nodded. Yeah. I tapped the paper once, but they're not. Silence settled in again. Then Lydia spoke. This is your pivot point, she said. How? You stop documenting, she said, and you start moving. Jake looked between us. Meaning? Meaning we take control of the narrative before they realize they've lost it, she said. I nodded slowly. They still think I'm behind, I said. You are, Jake added. Not anymore. I stood up, walked to the window, looked out at the lake, at the docks, at the structures rising where they shouldn't be. They think this is about fines, I said. They're about to find out it isn't. Lydia's voice came through again. You file first, she said. Quiet title, declaratory judgment, establish ownership before they have time to reposition. And the homeowners? Jake asked. They get pulled into it, Lydia said. But they're not the target. I turned back. The HOA is. Jake frowned. This is going to hit everyone. Only if they stay with her, I said. He held my gaze. You think they will? I thought about the orange notices, the signs, the pressure, the silence from people who knew something was off but didn't want to say it. No, I said finally. I think they just haven't seen the truth yet. I walked back to the table, folded the survey carefully. Not rushed, not emotional, just deliberate. Then we show them, I said. Jake nodded slowly. And Veronica? I looked down at the page with her property line cutting into mine. At the 6-foot overreach she never questioned. She's already shown me everything I need, I said. Lydia didn't respond, because she knew what that meant. I picked up my phone, scrolled to her contact, paused. Not yet. Timing mattered. And now, for the first time, I controlled it. I set the phone down. Tomorrow, I said. Jake exhaled. Tomorrow what? I looked at the map one last time, at the lines that didn't lie. Tomorrow, I said, we make it public. Because once that happened, there was no putting it back. And when it hit, it wouldn't just shift the balance. It would break it. By the time I pulled into the clubhouse parking lot the next evening, Every space was taken. Cars lined both sides of the road. People stood in clusters outside, talking low, glancing toward the entrance like something inside was already happening. Word had spread. I stepped out of the truck with the survey folder under my arm. Jake was already there, leaning against his tailgate. "You sure about this?" he asked. "No," I said. "That was the truth." Then I started walking. The room was packed, standing room only. 47 homes meant 47 families, and it felt like most of them were there. Faces I recognized, faces I didn't. Some curious, some irritated, some already defensive. At the front of the room, Veronica Hale stood behind a folding table set up like a podium. Same posture, same confidence, same calm control. She was already talking when I stepped in. "And as many of you are aware, we've had ongoing compliance issues with certain properties," she said, voice clear, measured. "These actions are necessary to maintain the value and integrity of this community." A few nods, a few murmurs. Then her eyes found me, and stopped. Just for a second. Then she smiled. "There he is," she said. "Mr. Cole. I was wondering if you'd join us." Every head turned. I didn't stop walking, didn't acknowledge the attention, just moved forward until I was close enough for everyone to see me clearly. "Good," she continued. "Then we can address this directly." She gestured toward the table. "Mr. Cole has raised concerns regarding HOA enforcement actions, despite clear documentation of non-compliance." A few people shifted. Some looked at me differently now. Not as a neighbor, as a problem. I set the folder down on the table, opened it. Slow, deliberate. "You demolished a structure on my property," I said. Her smile didn't move. "We enforced a violation under the authority granted by this association. You enforced something you don't own." That got a reaction. Not loud, but noticeable, a ripple through the room. Veronica's expression tightened, just slightly. "That's not accurate," she said. I pulled out the first page of the survey, set it flat on the table, turned it so everyone could see. "Then explain this." She didn't look at it right away. Instead, she kept her eyes on me. "This is not the forum for conspiracy theories. It's a licensed survey," I said, cutting her off. "Stamped, filed, verified against original county records." That did it. People started moving closer, leaning in, looking. Jake stepped up beside me. "Take a look," he said to the nearest group. "It's all there." Veronica finally glanced down. Just a flicker, then back up. "That doesn't change the authority of the HOA. It changes everything," I said. I pointed to the map. Red lines, clear, defined. "This is the original parcel," I continued. 42 acres, never fully subdivided, not the way your documents claim." More murmurs now, louder, confused. "What does that mean?" someone asked from the back. I didn't take my eyes off Veronica. "It means," I said, "everything you've been told about what the HOA owns is wrong." That landed harder. Veronica straightened. "This is misinformation," she said sharply. "The association has legally recorded boundaries, based on incomplete filings," I replied, ignoring the original deed that still holds control over the retained land. I flipped to the next page. The clubhouse overlay, blue structure, inside red boundary. "Start here," I said. "Your clubhouse." People leaned in closer. Someone near the front frowned. "That's not right." "It is," Jake said. "We checked." I flipped again. Residential plots. Encroachments marked in red. Gasps now. Not loud, but real. Veronica's voice cut through it. This is a misinterpretation. Lot 17, I said. She stopped. Just for a second, then recovered. What about it? I turned the page toward her. Her property, highlighted, encroachment marked. 6 feet over. Your house, I said. Silence. Full. Heavy. No murmurs now. Just stillness. Because everyone saw it. Everyone understood it. Veronica looked down again. This time longer. Then back up. This doesn't invalidate the association's authority, no, I said. It invalidates your ownership. That broke it. The room shifted, not subtly. People stepping back, looking at each other, recalculating. You've been enforcing rules, I continued, on land you don't own, collecting fees on property you don't control, and demolishing structures without legal authority. That's not... Then why does every structure here sit on land tied back to a master deed your association never replaced? No answer. Just tension. Tight. Visible. Someone spoke from the side. Is this true? Another voice. Did they check this before we bought? A third. What happens to our homes? That was the moment. The one where control slipped. Not all at once, but enough. Veronica stepped forward, raised her voice. This is fear-mongering, she said. The HOA operates within legal frameworks approved by the township. Then why is the sheriff here? Someone asked. Heads turned. Daniel Ruiz stood near the back, arms folded, watching. He didn't step forward immediately, didn't interrupt. But now he did. Because I was asked to observe, he said. Calm, measured. All I can confirm, he continued, is that the documents Mr. Cole is presenting are legitimate. That was it. Not a ruling, not a declaration. Just confirmation. But it was enough. Because once the paperwork was real, everything built on top of it became questionable. The room erupted, voices overlapping, questions firing, confusion turning into something sharper. Veronica raised her hands, trying to regain control. This meeting is adjourned, she said loudly. Nobody listened, because for the first time, she didn't have the room anymore. I gathered the papers slowly, didn't rush, didn't speak again, because I didn't need to. The shift had already happened. People weren't looking at me the same way now. They weren't looking at her the same way either. They were looking at the ground, at the space beneath their homes, at something they thought was stable and wasn't. I walked out of the room without another word. Jake followed. Outside, the air felt different, not calmer, charged, like something had been cracked open and couldn't be sealed again. Jake exhaled hard. Yeah, he said. I didn't answer, because I was still thinking about one thing. Not the meeting, not the reaction, not even Veronica. Just the next move, because now they knew. And once they knew, they wouldn't stay still. They didn't wait a day. By morning, the first move came in quiet. No trucks, no signs, no public display. Just paperwork. A certified letter taped to my front door. I peeled it off slowly, already knowing it wouldn't be about compliance anymore. Inside, legal language, threats dressed professionally, cease and desist, defamation, interference with community operations. Veronica's name sat at the bottom, alongside an attorney I hadn't seen before. I read it once, then again. Same pattern, pressure, control. But something had changed. The tone wasn't confident anymore. It was defensive. I folded the letter and set it with the others. Another piece of the record. Another step in the pattern. By noon, Jake called. "They're locking everything down," he said. "Emergency HOA meeting. Closed session. No residents allowed." "Good," I replied. "You keep saying that. Because panic makes mistakes." There was a pause. "You think they're panicking?" "I know they are." That afternoon, Lydia came back. No hesitation this time. No questions. Just action. "We file now," she said, setting her briefcase on the table. "What exactly?" "Quiet title," she replied. "Declaratory judgment. We establish your ownership legally before they can restructure anything." "And the HOA?" She met my eyes. "They become defendants." That word landed differently than anything else so far. Defendants. Not authority, not governing body. Defendants. I nodded once. "Do it." Filing took less time than I expected. Preparation took longer. Every document scanned, every survey attached, every violation recorded, every notice logged. By the time Lydia submitted it, the case wasn't just about ownership. It was about conduct, a pattern, a system, something a judge couldn't ignore. "Once this is served," she said, "everything changes." "How fast?" "Faster than they can react." Service happened the next morning. 47 notices, one for every homeowner, one for the HOA, one for Veronica Hale. By noon, the neighborhood exploded. Phones ringing, cars pulling into driveways, people standing in the street, holding papers, reading the same words over and over like they might change. Jake showed up again, holding his copy. "You sued everyone," he said. "I named everyone," I corrected. "There's a difference." He looked down at the document. "They think you're taking their homes. I'm not. Then you better tell them that fast." I nodded. "Tonight." The second meeting was bigger, louder, less controlled. This time, Veronica didn't open it. She couldn't. People were already talking before it started. Questions, anger, confusion. Are we losing our houses? What is this about land ownership? Did the HOA know about this? Veronica stood at the front again, but she didn't have the same presence. Not this time. Now she looked pressed, tight around the edges, trying to hold something together that was already slipping. "This is a legal tactic," she said loudly. "An attempt to intimidate this community into submission. It says you don't own the land," someone interrupted. She froze for half a second, then recovered. "The HOA operates under recorded authority." "Answer the question," Jake said from the side. Silence. Real silence this time. All eyes on her. Then, "No," she said. One word. Too fast, too sharp, not convincing. The room shifted again. I stepped forward. Didn't raise my voice. Didn't rush. "I'm not here to take anything from you," I said. That cut through. People turned toward me instead. "You're here because you deserve to know the truth," I continued. "About what you were sold. About what's actually under your homes." I held up the map. Same one as before. But now, it meant more. Because now it was part of a case. Not just a claim. "This land," I said, "was never fully transferred out of my family's ownership." Murmurs. Fear. "But you've been paying for it," I added. "Through fees, through fines, through enforcement that shouldn't have existed in the first place." A woman near the front spoke up. "Then what happens to us?" That was the moment, the turning point. I met her eyes. "You stay," I said. Confusion. "What?" "You stay," I repeated. "I'm not evicting anyone. I'm not taking homes." Veronica stepped forward. "You can't make that promise." "I can," I said. And this time, I cut her off. "Because I'm not interested in what you've been doing," I continued. "I'm interested in fixing it." That landed differently. Not fear, not anger, relief. Small at first, then spreading. "What does that mean?" someone asked. "It means the HOA goes away," I said. "No more fines, no more arbitrary enforcement." Veronica laughed. Sharp, like it's that simple. "It is," I said, "when the foundation it's built on doesn't exist." I turned slightly, letting the room see both of us. "You built authority on land you didn't own," I said to her. "Collected money on property you didn't control, and enforced rules that were never legally yours to enforce." She didn't respond. Couldn't. Because now, it wasn't just me saying it. It was the documents, the filings, the case, and everyone in that room knew it. I lowered the map. "This isn't about taking," I said. "It's about correcting." Silence. Then a voice from the back. "What about the money we paid?" Another. "What about the fines?" Jake stepped forward slightly. "Good question." I looked at Veronica. "For that," I said, "we audit everything." Her face went pale. Just for a second. But it was enough because now, everyone saw it. The shift wasn't coming anymore. It was happening. Right there. Right then. And Veronica Hale, for the first time, didn't have control of the room. I stepped back. Let the silence fill in. Because the truth didn't need help anymore. It was already doing the work. And the question now wasn't whether the HOA would survive. It was how much damage it would take down with it. The fallout didn't take weeks. It took hours. By the next morning, the neighborhood didn't look the same. Not physically. Nothing had been torn down. Nothing had changed on the surface. But the way people moved, the way they talked, the way they looked at each other, that was different. Groups formed where there hadn't been any before. Conversations happened in driveways instead of behind closed doors. Phones stayed in hands longer, and for the first time since I'd moved back here, nobody was looking at the HOA for answers. They were looking at each other, and at me. Lydia moved fast. By noon, she had filed an emergency motion to freeze HOA accounts pending audit. By afternoon, the county clerk confirmed receipt. By evening, Veronica's access to those funds was restricted. Not fully gone, but slowed, controlled, watched. Jake showed up with a grin I hadn't seen before. "They're scrambling," he said. "Board members are calling emergency sessions. Nobody's picking up." "Good," I said. He leaned against the fence, looking out toward the clubhouse. "They tried to push a special assessment this morning," he added. $4,000 per household. I shook my head once. "And?" Half the room walked out before she finished talking. That was the break. Not the lawsuit. Not the survey. Trust. Once that was gone, everything else followed. The county got involved 2 days later. Not because of me, because of the paperwork, unpaid property taxes tied to land classified incorrectly under HOA control. It didn't take long for them to notice the mismatch, or the amount. 6 years, compounded. Penalties stacked on top of assumptions no one had checked. By the time the notice hit the HOA office, the number was enough to shut everything down. Jake read it out loud when he brought a copy over. 87,000, due within 30 days or subject to enforcement action. I leaned back in my chair. They don't have that kind of money, he said. No, I replied. They don't. Then what happens? I didn't answer right away, because the answer wasn't complicated. It was just inevitable. Veronica tried one last time. She called me directly, didn't block her number, didn't disguise her voice, just called. I answered. Silence on the line for a second. Then, "We can resolve this," she said. No greeting, no tone control, just pressure wrapped in control. "I'm listening," I said. "You drop the filings," she continued. "We remove all outstanding violations. Clear your record completely." I let the silence sit. Then, "And the rest of them?" A pause. "They're not your concern." That told me everything I needed to know. "They are now," I said. Her voice tightened. "You're making a mistake." "No," I replied. "You already made it." Another pause. Longer. Then, "You think you can take this whole place?" I looked out at the lake, at the houses lining the shore, at the people who had no idea how close they'd come to losing everything. "I don't have to take anything," I said, "because it was never yours to begin with." She hung up. The final meeting wasn't held at the clubhouse. It couldn't be. By then, the county had issued a temporary hold on HOA operations pending review. So we met at the public library. Neutral ground. No authority. No control. Just facts. 47 households. 45 showed up. That was enough. I stood at the front, same folder in hand. But this time, no confrontation. No resistance. Just attention. "I'm withdrawing the claim against homeowners," I said. That landed first. Relief moved through the room. Not loud, but real. "You're not losing your homes," I continued. "That was never the goal." A woman near the front nodded slowly. Then someone else, then more. "But the HOA," I added, "is done." No one argued. Because by then, everyone knew. Jake stepped forward with copies of the audit summary. Numbers, transfers, irregularities. Nothing exaggerated, nothing emotional, just facts. And facts did what they always do. They stripped away everything else. Veronica wasn't there. Neither was the board. They didn't have a place in that room anymore. "What replaces it?" someone asked. That was the final step, the one that mattered most. I placed a new document on the table. Not a lawsuit, not a notice, a proposal. "Community Land Trust," I said. "Transparent, fixed ground rates, no arbitrary enforcement, no fines without due process." Silence. Then, "How much?" $600 a year, I said. Locked. Stable. No escalation, without vote. People looked at each other. Calculated. Compared. Then, nods. Small at first. Then more. Jake handed out sign-up sheets. Names started going down, one after another. Not rushed, not pressured, just chosen. 42 households signed that night. The rest followed within the week. The county closed its review 2 weeks later. Formal notice. HOA dissolved. Financial investigation opened. Assets frozen. Veronica Hale named directly in the report. Not as president, as responsible party. I didn't go to the hearing. Didn't need to. I'd already seen the end of it. The lake looked different again after that. Not because anything changed physically, but because the tension was gone. No new signs, no notices, no enforcement. Just water, just land. Just people starting to trust what they actually had. Jake stopped by one evening, leaning on the rebuilt dock frame. You could have taken everything, he said. I looked out at the water. I know. Why didn't you? I thought about that for a second. Then, because they weren't the problem, I said. He nodded, looked back toward the houses. Still, he added, you own all this. I shook my head slightly. No, I said. I tapped the paperwork resting on the table behind us. I understand it. That was the difference. Ownership was just paper. Understanding. That was control. The sun dipped lower over the lake, casting long reflections across the water. Jake pushed off the railing. So what now? I picked up a piece of lumber from the stack beside me, measured it against the frame, set it in place. Now, I said, we rebuild what they tore down. He smiled. And for the first time since this started, everything was quiet again. Not empty, not tense, just right.
One thing this whole situation told me is that ownership isn't just about what you see. It's about what written down, what records, and what you are willing to understand before someone else defines it for you. I almost missed it myself, not because it wasn't there, but because I assume everything has a real been handled. Turn out quite detailed. All these overlooked lines can carry more weight than anything loud or official. They are kind of strength in staying steady when things don't make sense, not reacting right ways, not letting pressure for a past decision. Just taking the time to look deeper and better question and stand on what actually true. That's not about winning, it's about holding on to what matters without losing yourself in the process. If you ever deal with something like this, whether it's an HOA, property issues, or just someone passing past word or sound, go ahead and drop a yes in the comment. I'd be interested to hear how you handle it. And if you appropriate story like this, real situation, real lesson, and people factoring this out the right way, consider surprising. Demo artist and you're always welcome here.